Hello, everybody. Welcome to Messari Happy Hour, episode 10. We've got the governor team with us today, along with one of our analysts, Johnny TVL. They'll introduce themselves here in a second. But before we start, let's begin with a quick disclaimer. All opinions expressed by our hosts and our guests are merely their own opinions. They do not reflect any endorsements or opinions of their companies. This discussion is meant for informational purposes only. You should not take their opinions as investment advice, as you will be solely responsible for your own investment. Hosts and guests may hold cryptocurrencies discussed in this Twitter Spaces. Additionally, certain Messari employees are required to disclose their holdings, which is updated monthly and available at our website. As always, I will share a link to our latest disclosures tweet. And to kick it off, we had two governor's notes, actually four over the course of this past month, but two that we'll touch on today. And we're going to lead it off with the governor note that was authored by Joel and Tomas on the Uniswap Foundation proposal and their request for 4% of the Uniswap treasury to increase Uniswap grant funding. So if the group wants to kick off with a little more detailed primer on that, I'll mute.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. So I'll go through, talk about the primer for the Uniswap proposal. The proposed budget was $74 million, and this is for the new Uniswap Foundation, a legal entity that's separate from Uniswap Labs, and the proposed and now since this governor note, this vote is passed. So the team's comprised of Devin Walsh and Kevin Ning, I hope I'm saying that right, two high-profile members of the Uniswap ecosystem. Devin worked at Uniswap Labs and stepped down to put forth this proposal, and then Ken was doing the Uniswap's grant program previous to this, and the Uniswap Foundation, beyond kind of like the legal purposes, it's kind of like a Uniswap grants program V2. So it's just like a large increase in budget to grant to the Uniswap community to drive more value. And it kind of gets controversial a bit with some of the community sentiment going back and forth, which we'll dig into, from smaller members of the Uniswap community, saying, is this the right move for the Uniswap's treasury? And, how much impact has there been in the previous grant money that's been distributed to the Uniswap ecosystem? And kind of talking about deliverables and quantifiable deliverables that people can look out for in the future from the new formation of the Uniswap Foundation.
Joel, I got a question for you. Like, broad strokes, DAOs have been using foundations for a long time, but I feel like there's more thought, well, I'm sure there's always thought about it, structure around it now. Like Paradigm has a really good tool around different legal structures if you're doing a foundation as a DAO, and Andreessen Horowitz or A16Z Crypto, whatever, also does a lot of work around what your legal framework should be. My question is, like, why do DAOs need a foundation? Like, why would you do this? Why would you create a real world entity? What's the point?
Yeah, great question. So I think in this scenario, the one that they have, I pulled it up because they kind of loosely mention it in one of the comments, I believe, on the forum, would be like a Delaware C Corp. So the main benefit for them is that they want to have an entity that acts as a liability and tax blocker, just with like these funds that are sitting relatively idle until they figure out how to disperse it, which is just kind of like the main benefit versus the other legal options, wrappers, corporations, offshore corporations or foundations. That's kind of like the main benefit. But once again, they did say in the proposal that they're going to spend some of the grant money to research this fully and put something out there to say what they're actually going to do, because they kind of bought themselves some time over the next 6 months before settling on one that they've decided on.
So they haven't committed to what type of legal entity they're going to make yet?
Correct. They've just suggested strongly that they're going to do the Delaware C Corp just for the tax benefit and liability reasons. like there's a few other ones, but that's like the main point that they stressed. And so once again, it could change based off research that they pay for in grant form.
Hopefully they're not talking to Michael Saylor's tax lawyers. Cool. I have one question. What you said this is kind of like a grants 2.0. How much did the Uniswap grants? What was their funding? How much did they have? Because 74 mil is to most people that's a real chunk of change. So what did they have originally?
Joel, you're muted.
Thank you. Been a while since I've dug into this, but if I recall correctly, I think it was like 7 million, I believe.
Oh shit! Okay, so shoot, that's a big. That's a big.
Stub your toe there.
Stub my toe.
So they 7 million of uni, so it wasn't like USDC or anything. That was to 122 grantees over 18 months, and that was where kind of a lot of people were lashing out, saying, what has this 7 million done for the Uniswap community? Does the TVL increase? Has the number of users increased? Like, where's the quantifiable metrics? So there's a little bit of discussion over that. But I would kind of parallel this to like VC investing. You're not really going to know for whatever 5 to 10 years, and then kind of look back at that. So it doesn't really satisfy the community right now in the short term, but you got to take more long-term perspective on the matter. I
like that frame. I've seen this in a couple forums because it's like it's a very tricky dance as capital allocators, which is kind of what DAOs are with their treasury, of like you're shelling out a ton of money for these different things, and in non-DAO land, like you do an ROI analysis before you do these things usually. Like you know what you want out of them. But to your point, maybe in startups you don't exactly do that. And I saw someone write in forum recently that like usually in startups you do run, like you're burning cash. So it's I don't know. I mean, maybe Uniswap is grown up enough that they shouldn't be like just okay to keep burning cash, and at some point they need to think about actually making money. But at the same time, you can look at like the Amazons of the world and whatever, who grew up for 20 years of their business and had no desire to like be cash flow positive and just reinvest in the business. I don't know. What do you guys think, Traver, Joel? Like, is that a fool's errand to say like, it takes money to make money, or should we be more structured with DAO spending?
I think that just jump in here is like you want to think about like the maximum value. You got to take shots, you got to take swings, and so you got to disperse that money. It's kind of like if we're paralleling this to VC investing, you only got to hit on like 10% or 5% of your investments, and that makes up like your whole spend of the fund, right? Because it's just gonna 10x, 100x. So and then to the other part of that is that I think with the Uniswap Foundation, I just saw them post, I don't know if it's a forum post or whatnot the other day, or just a tweet thread saying that they are looking to help one of their past Uniswap grant program grantees get more users through additional Uniswap Foundation grant funding. So it's like a data analytics DeFi Uniswap grantee that received money, and they're trying to bolster them up with some money to other grantees to build on top of this analytics platform. So I think that's going to be like something different with this DAO treasury spend, is that they can keep kind of building on with things that are the grantees that are in their portfolio, you want to call it. And big macro picture, I don't know, it's kind of like the spray and pray of, do they spend the DAO treasury to your question, or is it just like they need to start making money, which I think, if you ask Kasu, that'll be a different answer.
Yeah, true. It's also quite different than I was just thinking like it'll be interesting to see. It's very different than the like Optimism grants plan, where they're like, we're going to have this retroactive public funding grant, like sort of this specific DAO, which as a group will make the decisions for where we give this money. And I think historically that's how grant grants have worked, right? Like most DAOs have made grant sub DAOs, and those sub DAOs have had multiple people who are assessing grant allocations. And I don't know if that's, I mean, there's a big argument of this now in VC in general, which is like, can you do VC as like a Tiger-esque thing where like it is like spray and pray, like you said, or should VC be more one or two like smaller cells and then personal relationships and like funding great teams and founders and stuff like that? So I think it'd be interesting to see how that plays out comparing this. I mean, 74 mil is no joke. That's a pretty good sized business that Devin and Kevin got their hands on. So, all right, cool.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of money. I think that with that, like, the VC approach, like the bigger delegates mentioned in this proposal, they highlighted that they were very positive on the Devin and Ken being on the Uniswap Foundation team, which is kind of more akin to the VC investing I don't know, frameworks that I've seen these days, are they're just investing in people, instead of like the idea, the merit of the project. It's like, if, they're two-time founder or whatever, they're more likely to get, more money, better support, quicker and faster through VCs. So I think that's another way of thinking of it.
Joel, do we have any idea of how this compares to other foundations in the space that have been founded? Like 74 million is a lot of money, but Uniswap is also Uniswap. They're not necessarily one of these smaller DeFi protocols that is spinning out a grants program. Just wondering if you have an idea of how that compares to other foundations in the space in terms of like native token supply and dollar funding.
Yeah, sure. So one interesting part to caveat this before I answer that is that Uniswap was pretty much the only Uniswap Foundation was the only one I found where a DAO started after they launched their token. So most of the foundations have been launched right at the inception of the token. So this is a little bit different. So it's kind of hard to compare apples to apples, but that's why that relative percentage of like 4% of Uniswap's treasury is going towards this foundation. That's compared to the Graphs Foundation. They allocate 26% of their treasury or circulating token supply to the foundation. Optimism allocated 64%. DYDX allocated 22% to the foundation, and Solana allocated 12.5%. So once again, it's kind of hard to compare. It's a little bit different terms, but there's definitely, even though it's a significant or more significant nominal amount of 74 million, it's a smaller percentage of the treasury going there. So I think that's like something that people might have overlooked, which is important to consider when comparing these.
Joel, am I reading this right? It says $20 million worth of Uni to cover operating expenses for the next 2 years, and then 54 million of Uni in 6 to 12 months, which actually funds the investing. So like this operating budget is not so lean.
Yeah, it was 14. I think it was 14 million that was for the operating budget for 3 years. So they expect out what it would cost to build the team and pay top talent. They kind of mentioned that a few times in the comments, I believe. And then this, I think it's 54 million, 20 million until the next tranche, I believe. So they go, once they've given out I think it's 20 million for the first bit, they go back to the DAO and get approved for the rest of the 74 million to, kind of checks and balances to make sure that the DAO is happy with how they're spending the money on the grants program, or the grantees.
Wait, so what's been approved was they get 14 big ones to build this thing, and then in 6 months they come back to see if they actually get the money to allocate it. Is that right?
It's like a combination. There's I don't have it up here.
Dude, how big of a team are they putting together? 14 mil over 2 years?
over 3 years, I guess they said.
Over 3 years. Okay.
Yeah, and I think they spec'd out. I don't have the numbers here. It was like, I think it's like I don't know. It's like either 20 people or something,
Okay.
for all that, and then they go and they have like a portion of it for the grants program for the first 6 or 12 months, and then they come back for the rest once it's all set up, approved. Just ensure that there's process on the legal side, because I think they wanted legal to be done first before they got the primary part of the allocation of the 74 million.
Okay.
Yeah, I think looking at the budget, they had $6.5 million for salaries, and $2 million for legal in the first 2 years as an estimate. So that's kind of, but like a good portion of this is legal, and then another $1 million essentially for legal insurance. There's a lot of legal costs, I think, wrapped up in that operating budget that might be inflating it as well.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Traver, for sure.
Before we move to the next year, gentlemen, do we kind of want to wrap with what the potential price impact could be of releasing this much from Uniswap's treasury, or what the fears and concerns might be?
Yeah, for sure. So that was brought up a couple times in the forums and on Twitter. Always this deal would be OTC anything, because they've mentioned that they would be granted the money in Uni, and then it would be flipped into USDC so that they could, pay employees or pay legal in a dollar-based or stable coin. And they said that we're talking with private brokers and private investors to do this OTC, so it wouldn't have, the impact on the exchange, but probably a little bit of negative sentiment that a fairly large chunk of Uni tokens are getting put out onto the market, and adding to the circulating supply out there.
To wrap it up, what are the group's thoughts on something at this scale as it pertains to Uniswap specifically? Now that it's, Joel, you said it was sorted, correct? The proposal is passed. This will happen. What does the group think in general?
Yeah, I'm not totally surprised by it. I think we're seeing foundations and legal frameworks being created across the space. We've had 4 show up on Governor, and it seems like the past couple weeks. So I think that's definitely a trend. As far as the funding for the program, these original DeFi and DAO class has always been very focused on grant funding and trying to create public goods in the space. So I think we're going to see more money kind of funneled in this direction, not less, over the years if we continue to see these OGs be successful.
Yeah, I agree with Trav. I'll let Joel take us home, but I think also Trevor made a good point. Like, it's Uniswap, like they got guap, they're going to do it big. So it's a big proposal. I'm very hopeful of like retroactive public funding and stuff like that in crypto. I'm not sure it'll work, but I sure as hell think we should try. So I'm pretty stoked to see how this turns out.
Yeah, I'm with both of you. It's definitely an experiment worth trying. I think it's kind of more down the public goods funding route, obviously, where you're not taking any Uniswap isn't really taking any vested interest. I know Compound, I believe, has like tested out this with a couple projects where they've invested and actually taken some tokens, whatever, in return. So it's just like experiment worth trying to conclude, and you'll see in probably 5-10 years what the actual impact was to Uniswap and the greater DeFi system of onboarding more users to DeFi, I would say.
Hey, also just to show Joel's piece, this is fantastic. The graphics in here, it's very, very, very good. Highly recommend.
Thank you, sir. Spent a lot of time in those circle charts.
Let's shift quickly to funds being funneled in the opposite direction. The second note that we'll cover here is Fei Labs unwinding Tribe DAO in what could set a precedence as one of the largest unwindings in the space's history. There, obviously, if you've checked out the report and looked at the first graphic there, quite a few steps on the timeline leading up to this. So if somebody wants to kick it off and kind of play catch up for us, let's start there.
Yeah, happy to kick this off. So essentially, as Doug stated, Tribe DAO is unwinding, and they're the DAO behind Fei Protocol and also Rari, which they acquired last year in December. It's been a pretty well-publicized ride for Tribe DAO and Fei, I think, their entire existence. So this is a big proposal, but it's not the first time they've been kind of in the limelight. So I think to kind of put this in context, there's really a timeline of events here, but we'll just start with TIP-120, which was the first big proposal that had to do with the unwind. So essentially, there are 3 steps to the unwind that need to take place. There's a consolidation step, which consists of taking all of the Tribe DAO's assets and consolidating them, switching assets that need to be sold into DAI or USD or something that can be distributed back. Then there is an issue of repayment and how those funds get distributed. There is also a redemption where Tribe token holders, the governance token of Tribe DAO, token holders would be able to redeem their tribe for treasury assets that remain. So those are kind of the 3 big steps. TIP-120 was the first proposal that I mentioned that was passed. It returned all of the unvested tokens from the core team back to the DAO. And then now we have most recently TIP-121, which is a proposal for the future of the Tribe DAO. And it essentially puts all of the protocol controlled value into the hands of the DAO to redistribute. This is where it gets a bit messy. The first step of consolidation has been started. So they voted to, they voted to sell a bunch of the assets in terms of LUSD. They are selling 21,000 ETH. There's a number of assets that are also held by the DAO. They have approximately 50,000 staked ETH, which due to liquidity issues, they're going to try and find a way to either distribute to Tribe token holders during redemption or sell, maybe OTC. And then there's a number of governance tokens, which they also hold, such as Index, Fox, Liquidity, Aura, and Angle, which they need to find out a way to distribute as well, since due to limited liquidity and the size of those holdings could prove damaging for those DAOs and their tokens, kind of natural economies and communities. I think the biggest piece of this is the Fuse hack victim payment. So back in April, there was a exploit in which $80 million were stolen from the Rari Capital Fuse pool, which was a product of the Tribe DAO. The Tribe DAO voted not to refund the hack victims. And now that the Tribe DAO is unwinding, there's kind of a movement from a lot of the larger stakeholders to receive reimbursement for the funds that were lost. And essentially what you have here is a tension between the exploit victims and the rest of the Tribe DAO holders and community trying to get their hands on the assets that remain. So that's kind of a high-level overview. I know Johnny TVL has worked quite a bit on the protocol in the past, so I'll let him chime in if there's anything else he wants to add for this.
Bro, I have very, very strong opinions on this whole situation. So, let me just one disclaimer that I'm one of the lucky few who was not burned by like the Genesis launch of Tribe and Fei, which by the way was flipping huge. It was like 2.3 billion or something. It was enormous, and a massive flop, respectfully. It didn't work. It didn't work, and a lot of people got roasted. But it was huge. It was way too big. Like they never a V1 product should never be that big. Anyways, nobody's fault. So yeah. So my whole thing is, I hate when people are like, "Oh, these guys are frauds. Like they're money grabbing." Like, dude, there's 200 million up for grabs. Everybody's money grabbing. Don't point fingers at Fei Labs for money grabbing. Also, and I had a bit of like a tweet storm about this. They there's no like there's Robert Leshner, Zigote, big fan, said like they should treat hack victims like creditors. It's an interesting opinion, but like why? There are no creditors. There's nobody signed a risk agreement. There's no court here saying what the cap table looks like and who's of higher order. So like this is crypto, and it's the sovereign world where like you take your own risk. So no users of Fuse were promised that they were going to be less risky or like get helped out if something happened. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to do the right thing and like talk about what is the right thing and all that. So fast forward to like what they're doing, and it seems like they said, Fei Lab said, we're stepping back from Tribe. They stopped their vesting in like July or maybe even earlier. And they say like, we're going to put it up to Tribe holders as to how we disseminate the remaining value in Tribe DAO. I don't think there's any issues with that. And I think it's great that a lot of people spoke up and were like for Fox tokens and I mean, LUSD is another example, or like, the VBAL that they have locked up. Like, let's get these in an auction process or an OTC process because it will, dump the token, or some people would find value in it, and we want to maximize value for Tribe holders. Like, that's really cool, man. Getting this big of an unwind is really, really cool. So anyways, Fei had a bunch of entrepreneurs who went huge. It didn't work. And then they like saw a chance to find product market fit in November, December, combining Fuse and Fei, and went huge again with like a multi-billion-dollar merger. And they never were able to like launch their products off of that because of the hack. So bummer. Like sometimes startups don't work. They tried something really cool. It flopped, and happened to flop in like with $1 billion a couple of times, which is, I mean, it's crazy, but like it did. People bought the vision, whatever. So anyways, that's my spiel.
I've got a question for the group before you jump in, Traver. Do we think that, and you all might have a better insight on what the voting split looks like for Tribe DAO when it comes to Zach's point on like protecting individual users versus the team and the decisions they make? Do we think that there was something they could have done structurally, or was the hack such a large issue that it wouldn't have mattered from like a DAO governance structure or voting power split standpoint?
Yeah, so this is actually really interesting. The Tribe DAO governance structure is fascinating in that you have an elected council of representatives and the tribal councilor that serve as kind of a governing body for the protocol. So this actually, right after the hack happened, it went to vote on whether to reimburse victims, and it went on Snapchat and an off-chain vote. So the way that works is all the tribe holders can vote on Snapshot. If they approve the vote, it's up to the tribal council to go on chain and execute that proposal. What happened was, when the vote succeeded to reimburse the hack victims, and the tribal council put it on chain, it was vetoed by another checks and balance system that they have called the Nope DAO. And I actually kind of like this infrastructure. Essentially, the point of the Nope DAO is, like I said, a checks and balance infrastructure that checks the tribal council. So let's say the tribal council went against the wishes of the DAO and went ahead and put something on chain. If 10 million tribe holders got together and said, we want to veto this, they can. In this case, it was used to go against the actual off-chain vote and the elected, wishes of the people, or so was, really the interpretation. I think this got misreported a bit on Twitter, where people were saying, off-chain voting isn't legit. The infrastructure was like somehow rugged by the core team, and really no, certain insiders use the existing infrastructure to their benefit. But I just kind of wanted to clarify that. So what happened once it was vetoed is it went to an on-chain vote where the decisions would be final and executed on-chain. When that happened, the proposal to reimburse victims was not successful. And that's largely because a lot of these insiders voted again. If you have access to the article, you can kind of look at that breakdown and who was contributing to that. But yeah, that's a great question, and I think the governance aspect of it is definitely something that we can talk about more.
Trav, do you know anyone else who uses orcapods in like negative consent governance?
Yes.
Joel, do you know any?
Rook.
Okay.
Protocol uses negative consensus, I believe. I'm trying to think who else. Joel probably has some ideas too.
I think Lido on the Easy Track for validators uses negative consent, if I remember correctly.
What do you think? Trav, you were saying you like this. What do you guys think of that as a? I guess I'll just give a touch of background. Like negative consent basically says we're gonna like elect a core group who is able to make changes, and those changes will pass after a short time lock, assuming they don't get vetoed. That's like just negative consent. So anyone who holds the token theoretically can veto, but instead of having every proposal need to reach a quorum and all this other stuff, it just kind of increases like the nimbleness of the core team. So, but you guys like that? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think I think it serves a good point, and it's a nice kind of evolution from direct token governance, right? So we all know that you can't have people voting on every single proposal. The tiniest parameter changes are going to create voter fatigue, and there's been a lot of talk about trying to optimize and fast track governance. So having an elected council is one way to do that. I think in the event that you do have an elected council, it makes sense to have a veto infrastructure in place so that if they try to overstep their power structure, they're held accountable. I think in that sense, it really makes sense.
I think the other part is that one of the trends or talking points or narratives in governance is governance minimization. That was opted by Paradigm, and then Lido paid for some research around this as well for governance minimization. And I mean, I've read it, I understand it. I mean, my big gripe with it is that if you have negative consensus voting, or you go too far down the governance minimization rabbit hole, it's more likely than not that things are just going to get missed, and that things will just fall through the cracks. Because at some point, people are just get in the habit of not paying attention, I feel. So I think that's a greater risk than just for the sake of speed and time, which I think people should probably be wary of. There's pros and cons to both sides, obviously, but just one thing that comes to mind when I read it.
I was really hoping, and I didn't get there, but I haven't seen anyone use these orcapods with negative consent, meaning like you create this, and we had talked about this a little earlier, and maybe we can get into it. Maybe this is like for another happy hour, but just kind of like DAO governance structure as a whole, and where on the spectrum you want to fall of like doing everything internally or doing everything through service providers externally. And I feel like the orcapods is kind of an in between, because it's like you can fund the pod, and then that pod gets rights to do whatever they want that people can veto. But I don't know anyone else who's doing that. I thought that was a pretty innovative attempt at governance, but didn't quite get to see it.
It's all until Endgame by Maker comes out and just upends everything, and you don't know what you're doing anymore with all that.
I thought that was a movie script. I didn't realize that was a governance proposal. That'll be for another happy hour. I want to bring up one other thing, which is my favorite thing to come out of this little debacle, which is the Olympus DAO proposal, which is like And I say Olympus is not afraid to play game theory. Like, these guys get it. And they put forward a proposal in their chat to OIP, was it 112, align tribe voter interests with Fuse exploit victims. Like, this is the way. They're saying, like, I didn't go through the whole proposal, but like, there's no reason for tribe holders not to vote for tribe holders to get as much money as possible, unless hack victims give them an incentive to. Like, that's crypto 101, you know? So I would like to give a big kudos to Olympus. That's very cool. I hope it works. Way to play.
Yeah, that was super interesting. And just to give people some context as to why they're doing this, they lost approximately 10 million in bad debt, I believe, in the hack, and they've committed up to 9 million in voting incentives, capped at 10 cents per delegated vote. So they're kind of going all in to try and make this right and get reimbursement for Rari hack victims, which I agree with Zach. It makes for some compelling governance action, which we always love to see on the governor team.
Do we want to close with our thoughts on the most ideal ending to this line of proposals from the group? Not financial advice. Do your own research. You're muted, Johnny.
Oh, sorry. The most ideal would be that ETH rips into the merge and protocol controlled value doubles and everybody gets their money back. But assuming that that's not going to happen, for me, man, the idea would be they have a really well done like asset unwind where they take these right tail assets that they own, have an effective and like open auction for them to get as much money as possible for Tribe, while also like giving the people who want these the best chance to get them. And by the way, the idea of using Tribe as a receipt token to pick up like little dust of all these other things, it's just gonna be such a waste. Like, if you're a Tribe holder, I think you want to get as much DAI or whatever they're gonna use. It's gonna be DAI in the Tribe DAO as possible. So I'd like to see that unwind happen. One, I think it would be cool. Two, I think it would be best for Tribe holders. And then I would really like to see the hack victims come up with an incentive scheme to align their interests with Tribe interests. I haven't put thoughts. I don't like have a recommendation on how to do that, but I think that would be very cool. And then, everyone can sing Kumbaya into the sunset.
Yeah, I agree with Johnny. I think, it's going to have to play out how it plays out, and hopefully there's some reimbursement to hack victims at the very least. I think it'd be nice to see the smaller contributors who aren't DAOs, but actual people out there who lost money in the hack. I think they should definitely get their money back, and I think the proposals to date have reflected that. But beyond that, tribe holders took a risk, and the DAO went down. So, whatever they can get in fair value is going to be what they get.
Yeah, I think that it seems like they're acting in goodwill, good faith. I think it's an honest effort to try and make people whole as possible. I don't really have a whole standing. I think there's a few more parts of the saga to go. I'll be interested to hear what people want to score this out of 10, how far the unwind's gone. I know we got a wrap soon. So, I think that if you have access to this piece, it's definitely worth a read. It's not just the timeline of events, but some number crunching is awesome in this piece. So I highly recommend. Worth a read.
Hey guys, here's a totally useless prediction. I think Tribe did their launch like in the beginning of April of 2021, like at the peak, and then everything crumbled. And then when we had a nice little bounce in like November, December is when they did their merge. And I think when this thing finally gets unwound, that'll be the bottom. That's the completely useless zero quantitative prediction.
Love it. Like Joel said, check these pieces out. We've linked them up top via tweets. You can find the links to these specific reports at the bottom of Joel's thread and the bottom of the thread off the Messari account. You can also search for them by individual author on the Messari platform. Join us September 6th through 8th. So we're actually going to have spaces next week. These will be with everybody's favorite founder, 2-Bit Idiot. He's going to be bringing guests on all week. We'll be talking regulation, the merge, and privacy. And if you haven't yet, there's still some codes floating around out there. Go to our mainnet.events URL and meet us in New York at Pier 36 in September 21st through the 23rd. Thanks, folks.